Good day, Ames Chamber of Commerce members. Dan Culhane here with the Ames Chamber of Commerce with our March 26, 2021 legislative forum with our local legislators. We'll get started here shortly. I want to thank our sponsors, our public policy presenting sponsors, Ag Certain, First National Bank, and Renewable Energy Group. Our state public policy sponsors, Converse Conditioned Air and Venue Works. Our local policy sponsors, Barilla and Burke Corporation. And finally, if you require closed captioning today, there is a closed captioning button on the bottom of our screen. You can certainly click that, and that is sponsored by Green Hills Retirement Community. We're a little thin right now than we normally are, but I think we've certainly got competent and qualified folks to give us a good report on what's going on with the legislature today. I know Senator Jesse Green is maybe joining us later. Good to see Senator Herman Kornbach is here. Senator Sweeney, I think will be joining us. Representative Bacon will hopefully be with us as well. Representative Dave Dio. Dave, thank you for being here today. And Representative Beth Wessel-Crochelle, thank you for being here today. And I have not seen Representative Ross Wilburn yet, but we hope he will be able to join us as well. I think we'll follow a similar format to what we did last time we were together. I'd welcome opening comments from each of you with maybe a little bit of what's on your mind and how things are going throughout the session. Once that's concluded, we'll enter into some questions. And I'd really encourage our members that are on the call today, please ask questions. I've got questions always to take time if necessary, but this is for our members. So if you've got a question, please feel free to put it in the comment area, and I'll make sure it gets asked. So let's kick this off. We'll start right first with the first person I saw today was Representative Dave Dio. So Dave, what's on your mind? Welcome.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for the invitation, Dan. Appreciate being here. We're at the point in session where next week is the second final deadline. What that means is that bills that at this point to have stayed alive have to have gotten through a committee. By next week, bills that are policy bills to stay alive have to pass through at least one chamber in order to stay alive. And so we were working hard this week to try and get some bills off the floor of the Iowa House to make sure that some of the House files that we have are eligible, and sending bills over to the Senate. And then they've been sending some bills to us. And so when we get into next week, we'll be looking at some of those bills that just need a little bit of action to stay alive for the rest of the session. The big thing I think that'll be coming out here in the next few days is budget targets from both the House and the Senate. The Senate sent out a list of some of the things that they were, thought were some of their priorities. I think in the next few days, you'll see the House come out with a detailed budget as far as our targets, what the targets will be for each budget area. And some of the things that we're going to be looking at doing. I know one of the things you may want to talk about is broadband, and where I think right now the discussion this week indicated that we will probably pledge at least $100 million for the first year of broadband, and then probably scale it up after that to where we would still be committing about the same amount of dollars that the governor has, but we might phase it in a little bit, over a period of years with the rising to the third year. So that was one of the discussions this week that we were having specifically within the budget, but we've got just a lot of other things that our budget chairs right now are working on the last couple of days, and I think you'll see some of those numbers come out soon.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. Representative Wessel-Crochelle, welcome.
Hey, thank you. It's been a busy few weeks here in the legislature, and I guess I don't know exactly where to start, so I'm kind of interested in your questions. One of the things that is concerning to me that we passed this week was the creation of private charter schools. that will be funded publicly. So we've changed our, at least in the Iowa House, we passed a bill to change our charter school laws. I am one of those people, I'm a Democrat who's not completely opposed to charter schools. I have a niece actually who attended one. She is an adopted niece who had fetal alcohol syndrome and actually was sent to a public charter school. She was failing in 5th and 6th grade. She was just doing horribly. She actually, because it was targeted towards kids who have issues like fetal alcohol syndrome and ADHD. They didn't have homework to take home. Their classes were no larger than 15. But these were publicly funded, and she is now a semi-successful adult. She still struggles with her disability, but she's not in prison. And before that, she was definitely headed towards prison. So I think we can be creative with charter schools, and I wish we were. It definitely concerns me that we are kind of going in the direction that we're going, though. So I would love to see something different happen there. Higher education, again, I have some concerns with a lot of bills that have come out in terms of higher education. We have not done the anti-tenure bill on the floor of the House. I'm hoping that means it's dead. But as I recall, it was alive in both chambers after the first funnel. I just think there are, there just were so many bills out there that were trying to attack the regents. And, I think as in with any large organization, the regents had a few challenges that were made public, but they were all things that were being taken care of internally and should be taken care of internally. I mean, when you have a grievance as a student or as an employee, the first place to go is not the legislature. And the first place should be the channels within the organization. And if things are not resolved there, which I think most everything was resolved there, if they even tried the channels, that is the appropriate method for dealing with issues. We had the same issue with the Ames School Board and the Ames school community bringing grievances to the legislature, which deserved to go through the administration and the school board. So we're kind of finding a lot of people making things political that I don't think need to become partisan and political, that should be taken care of locally and through our communities. And it's just been kind of a sad year for me watching those types of things happen. So I am interested in your questions, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Beth. Senator Cornbach, good day.
Good day. I almost said good afternoon, but it's still morning by a few minutes. Thank you, Dan, for the Chamber's organizing this get together. Thanks to all the sponsors. It's quite an impressive list that you have there. I want to start with the good news, and most of the good news is coming from the federal level. The Biden administration, I think, is off to a terrific start. They got a major piece of legislation through to the Rescue Act to help us get back on track after to deal with the pandemic and then to get back on track afterwards. I don't know about you. I got my $1,400 check or deposit last weekend. Now, there are a lot of people who are still struggling and who really need the money. In my case, I'm doing okay without it. So I donated my previous stimulus check to the Emergency Residence Project. This one's going to go to a local food bank. There are a lot of people who are still hurting, who are still having trouble keeping a roof over their heads and keeping food on the table. President Biden had promised 100 million vaccinations in the first 100 days. He exceeded that 40 or 42 days ahead of schedule. So yesterday or the day before, he doubled the target to 200 million. And we're achieving someplace between 2.5 and 3 million vaccinations a day. So getting to 200 million in the first 100 days is well within reach. Longer term, the increase in the tax credits for kids is going to help lift half of our children out of poverty. That's going to affect rural and urban in Iowa. 40% of our kids qualify for free and reduced lunch in the schools, which is to say 40% of our kids depend on the schools for a fair part of just getting food in their bellies. So we really have to work harder on that. Our children are our future. We always say that, but we need to put some money behind that. We need to make some investment. Speaking of an investment, I'm looking forward to the introduction and passage of an infrastructure bill. We have roads, we have highways, we have airports, we have waterways, we have all kinds of infrastructure investments in this country that have been let go for too long. Deferred maintenance and more deferred maintenance has been too often the response to budgetary tightness, and that has led to deterioration in facilities. That's created in our urban areas backlogs and or traffic jams, and contributed, I think, to flooding, and and there are a lot of people who need the jobs in those construction areas. So that would be a great investment in our future. Let me comment a little bit. The anti-tenure bill in the Senate, it is dead. I think that's also the case in the House. I want to call out a couple of people. First of all is President Winterstein, who did a great job in reaching out to the ag community. And you don't usually see bills on university policy where the cattlemen and the pork producers lobbyists register, but they did here, and they did on the side that helps the university. They understood, and I give President Winterstein great credit for helping with the outreach. They understood just how important our university research, especially at Iowa State, is to the success of their industries. And the veterinary diagnostic lab is a key feature, the veterinary college in general, but generally speaking, the research in that area. And the other shout out is to Rick Sanders, the director of the ISU Research Park. He was very clear and provided some excellent data as to just what the impact is of that research park. The companies that are launched there, the companies that are attracted there, they come, the name tells you it all because of the research. And if you don't have high quality tenured faculty there, that whole economic engine collapses. So thanks to both President Winterstein and to Rick Sanders for their good work on that. We have a ways to go in convincing the general public. I saw the public opinion poll the other day. Somewhat more than half are in favor of tenure, but we need to get that message out there. But in terms of this bill, just some excellent work by our local folks.
Thank you, Senator. Let's jump into our first question. I don't see any from our audience, so I'll start with one. Representative Dio, you mentioned it a little bit in your opening remarks, but the second funnel deadline's coming up next week. What priorities have survived the funnel, and what priorities would you still like to see taken up before the funnel?
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on, since Senator Cornbach talked a lot about the bailout from the federal government, and one of the things that's causing some difficulties with us trying to put the budget together is we're still waiting for all the rules for those dollars to figure out what the strings are that are attached to that. And so that's gonna take us a while, I think, to understand exactly what the impact of some of those are going to be, because you've heard some of the things about concerns about whether or not we can actually cut taxes. I talked to someone with Ames here a couple weeks ago, and we're concerned. They're receiving $50 million, and they've only got an $18 million general fund budget. And they don't know for sure how they're going to spend it all or what the requirements are going to be. And they might, prefer to maybe be able to lower tax levies, but they may not be able to. So we're trying to figure out all of those ins and outs of those rules. And it may take us, the way we would like. I think we'd be on pace right now to be done early this year, but that may be, I can see the one thing that could delay us trying to wait for some of those answers. And we have the same problem with the federal budget. In some cases, we're getting so much money, we don't we don't really know exactly how we're going to spend it all. And in some cases, the incentives are to spend it on ongoing things that are, hire staff and things like that. But then, what do we do in 2 or 3 years when the money is gone? So those are things that we're still trying to get answers to. As far as policy bills, that I think most of our priorities that we wanted to work on, most of them have made it through the funnel, or at least should be able to make it through the funnel by next week. I've got a couple of bills that I'm working on that, at this point, I don't know, we're still trying to see if we have the votes and to see if they will make it through funnel, but there's still a lot of discussions going on. A lot of things can move in the next week. I think some of the main things that we wanted to get done, Beth mentioned education policy, the parts of the governor's education plan that were priorities for the House are still alive, and we've made a few changes to some of her proposals, but I think some good changes, and hopefully the Senate takes those up.
Thank you, Dave. Beth, priorities that you'd like to see taken up before the funnel deadline?
So I serve on both public safety and judiciary, so my focus is on some of those issues. One of the things that I would really like to see is a public safety omnibus bill that would take into consideration and work with, I say both sides, but there are lots of different sides to questions of public safety. The bills that we have taken up focus purely on one side of those issues since the death of George Floyd, and don't give us any balance. My concern is we haven't even in those bills even reached out to the communities that are concerned and have some questions. There are some good parts to both the bills that we've passed out of our public safety committee, but they're not balanced, and they do favor law enforcement over communities, and I don't necessarily think that makes our communities safer. I think that we have to have a balanced approach. And so I'm hoping, the governor did at least put in her bill to end racial profiling. I'm sad that that didn't come into the bills that we have passed. I think, I look at the report that the Ames Police Department put out when this first became a question. I appreciate that they reached out to minority communities within our community. I know that they did. And that they have made efforts to work with them on their concerns. And I wish that we at the state level would do the same thing.
Thank you, Representative Wetzel-Kroschel. Senator Cornbach?
Well, thank you. And I apologize if the phone was ringing in the background, another nuisance call. Sorry about that. That keeps happening. Let me identify one priority I had. I filed a bill that is now Senate File 452 to create a task force on learning loss. When the governor basically closed the public schools pretty much a year ago, I think last week, there wasn't any real preparation time on the part of our public schools to provide any kind of programming. They worked hard to provide what they could. But it was pretty clear that for the balance of the school year, a whole lot of students did next to nothing. And over the fall and winter, schools have only been able to operate partly in person, sometimes not at all in person, depending on the waxing and waning of the virus. So I put together a bill that would establish a task force, broad representation, all levels of K-12, parents, administrators, couple of ed professors, very broad representation. Got that through the Education Committee in the Senate unanimously. It is still, however, waiting for floor action. and it needs to get out of the Senate this week and needs to get out of the House Education Committee. This is something that, whatever you're feeling about hybrid or distant learning or whatever, it's clear that there was a fair degree of learning loss on the part of a lot of students, and we need to find ways to address that with maybe summer school or extra tutoring, or, I'm looking for the experts to give us some advice as to which direction to go and how to deal with that. One other school-related thing that I hope to see coming forward, it keeps getting promised, but I haven't seen it yet, is dealing with the school undercount from last fall. We did pass an allowable growth this year for which the allowable percentage increase actually was slightly above inflation. Over the last 4 years, we were under inflation by almost a cumulative about $300 million, $295 million. 97% of the surplus basically was accumulated by shortchanging our K-12 schools. This year, the problem isn't with the allowable growth. The problem is with the student count. Statewide, we were down 6,000 last fall. We usually gain 2,000 to 4,000 a year. I expect those 6,000 to be back next fall, and the increases on top of that. We may be seeing 10,000 more students this next year, which would equate to about $70 million of additional funding if we were using a more accurate forecast of the count. So we need to address that for K through 12. Local governments, local school boards can make up for that. That's the good news. The bad news is they do that by raising the property taxes, something called budget guarantee. For pre-K, for the preschool, however, that is not subject to budget guarantee. That's a straight out loss. Yesterday, I was on a subcommittee to actually try to expand preschool to bring in some, let's call them young 5-year-olds who might not be ready for kindergarten yet. And I think that's a terrific idea. But when I asked how people were going to pay for that, well, it sounded like they were going to be looking for loose change under the couch cushions. I mean, we have to step up and fund our priorities, which we are not doing in terms of education.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Jesse Green, welcome. Thank you for joining us this today. I guess it's still this morning, so thank you for visiting us this morning. Glad you could be here. Our first question was, with the funnel coming up next week, the 2nd, what are some priorities that are on your mind that you hope either make the funnel or things that are going through the Senate that you're optimistic will make the funnel?
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having us. And where do I start? Yeah, there's, I guess the first thing that comes to mind as far as funnel issues would be the bottle bill. Out of the committee, we've got it out of committee, and it's sitting in Ways and Means right now, Ken Rosenboom's bill, which I believe is the best bill that we have in the Senate. And it gets at the heart of the problem with the bottle bill, which is that unredeemed nickel, and also making sure that redemption centers are profitable again. And this, I call this bill the taxpayer bill for the bottle bill, because it provides transparency and it brings that unredeemed nickel back to the state, to the taxpayer, which is where it belongs. And I know in the House, there's a few bottle bills. I think Representative Dio could probably shed some light on this, and I look forward to hearing his perspective. But I heard the other day that the distributors and the grocers have come to some sort of agreement between the two of them. I'm not sure what that agreement looks like, but I believe that whatever that agreement looks like, I hope that it comes to fruition in the House, and we can get it out of the committee to survive the funnel. Let's see, the next thing that I expect to come forward is I talked to the governor this morning and with some of her staff about the ethanol bill, and it's evolved quite a bit in the last few weeks. And I anticipate here within a couple weeks that we'll have a chance to vote on that. At the heart of that ethanol bill is the idea of future-proofing our infrastructure to handle higher blends of ethanol. And that bill, that purpose of the bill has stayed intact. Everything else surrounding that bill, whether that's E10 standards or biofuel standards. A lot of that has been milked down quite a bit. The truckers had a big problems with the biodiesel side of things. What I expect to see is something like a B11 standard for the warmest months of the year, which is the 7 warmest months of the year, and there won't be any standard for the winter time. And on the ethanol side of things, initially with the governor's proposal, it had like mandates or date deadlines of 2025 that some of these infrastructure updates needed to be done by. That was felt unrealistic by a lot of groups, and that has certainly changed. Just yesterday out of Ways and Means, we dropped a big property tax bill, and I'm really excited about it. It's going to provide property tax relief, and it has a plan to get mental health funding off of property taxes, phase it out within a couple of years. This is a bipartisan effort, and I look forward to getting that across the finish line. And I'm grateful that the state is in a situation that we can kind of soak that in to our general funds and be able to adapt to that. And anyway, those are the first few thoughts. I don't want to take up all your time. So if you have any questions about the bottle bill, please ask me, and I'd be glad to answer.
Sounds good, Senator. Thank you. Thank you. Our first question from our audience is from Kevin Burke, the president and CEO of the Ames Convention and Visitors Bureau. COVID has certainly hit the hospitality industry in 2020. Iowa ranks 42nd in funding for tourism. House File 789 and Senate File 475 contain $5 million to the Iowa Economic Development Authority for increased tourism marketing. He'd like to know where each of you stand on this piece of legislation, and we'll start with Beth. Beth, please.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin, for the question. I think
Dan, might I just interrupt? Give me the bill numbers again, please.
Yes, it's
you're in
I
the
apologize, Beth.
789 and Senate File 475.
The last one was the Senate file. The first was a House file. Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
I don't serve on the committee where these are going through. I definitely see a need and would certainly be supportive of increasing our investment in tourism. I think we have a lot of work that we need to do in improve, making Iowa a place that we can bring people to. We all know and love the place, but tourism is an important part of what we do, and I'm certainly in favor of more investment in that area.
Very good. Thank you, Representative LaCrochelle. Let's move to, I had Senator Cornbach on my list next, but since he's coming back. Senator Cornbach, would you like to respond to that?
Sorry,
You're
muted.
You're mute.
Senator, you're muted.
I was just saying I'm fooling around with two different computers at the same time to call up the bill. Senate File 475. I am not on the committee for that. In the Senate, it is in appropriations. It has to do with transferring beer and liquor control fund, $7 million into tourism. I guess we're not going to go on winery tours then, or maybe we are. The last redistricting, I was real disappointed. I lost the city of Madrid, which is a great little town, and I also lost 2 wineries. I had 2 wineries in my district, and I lost both of them. Darn. Sure, I haven't had a chance to look at the numbers on this and to figure out whether the money freed up would be something that we could spare. But it's clear small business has really been crushed, especially anything that involves face-to-face service with customers. I'm trusting that there's a fair amount of money in the Rescue Act, the federal bill to help small business. There was the first time around, but the pain continues. Longer term, what I'd like to see us do to boost tourism is to invest in the I will, the 3/8 of a penny sales tax that would be used to enhance our outdoor recreation, our state parks. We've got some great state parks, and those you can visit even in pandemic times. Get out there in the fresh air and walk around. Longer term, we do need to invest in developing tourism properties and attractions, and that would be one way to do that. So I'll look at Senate File 475 when that comes to the floor and see what I can do for you.
Thank you, Senator. Dave, any response to House File 789?
Yeah, sure. I haven't had a chance to look at those bills. I don't, and I'm skeptical that the bill would take the money from one source to give it to tourism. Is may have some issues because generally what you'll find out is there was probably another use for that money before that was maybe another good use. I guess when we come forward, the House will have more detailed budget targets coming out soon, and maybe we'll see how much money is being appropriated for tourism. I used to be part of the chair of that budget, and tourism had its own line item in that budget as part of the Iowa Economic Development Authority under Debbie Durham, and I have not followed, how much money, if they've asked for an increase or not. Haven't really followed the details of that budget this year, so couldn't really tell you whether we're going to come up with more money. I will say, just as a side note, that one of the things I know, we'd like to see more tourism in Iowa, and it would be a great thing. But on the other hand, some of the states that got hurt the worst financially by COVID this year were either states that relied heavily on tourism or states that relied on gas and oil. And so we were kind of a little bit lucky that part of the reason why our budget has been so resilient has been the fact that we don't rely on either one of those things. And but so maybe we'll have some extra resources available to put into that going forward, because I think it is something that we need to work on to try and encourage more people to come here, especially maybe over the next year or so. I think overseas trips are still going to be difficult for a while, I think. So I think there probably will be some more demand, at least for a while, for people to travel here around the United States, and we could certainly maybe we could benefit from that, from some people traveling from other states, especially in the Midwest.
Thank you, Dave. Senator Green?
Yeah, so Senator Cornball and I see eye to eye on a couple things. I want to see us in, I like the I Will plan as well, and would support that in the future. But our state is sitting in a very good fiscal position. We've had to make a lot of tough choices the last few years, and I look forward to seeing the bill and investing more in tourism. I don't know much about the bill in particular, except I've heard some people that are involved have been talking about coordinating all the different regions or the tourism regions and combining them into one, and having like one website and trying to save money and be more efficient in Iowa's tourism. And again, it's just a real surfacey conversation that I've heard, and I think it all sounds like good ideas. But I guess that's all I can say for my thoughts. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Senator. Representative Wilburn, thank you for joining us today. It's good to see you. Our question was, there's a House File 789 is $5 million to the Iowa Economic Development Authority for marketing purposes. Kevin Burke, President and CEO of the Ames Convention and Visitors Bureau, was seeking input on where each of our representative officials stand on that legislation.
Thank you, and Dan, and thanks for, excuse me for being late. This is one of those days when things pop up and you got to take care of them when they're
We
at.
understand.
Yeah, absolutely. In general, supportive of this type of legislation. I caught a conversation about I Will and tourism. I think those are all critical important. I think it also shows the importance that where we can and when we can, that we try and create those opportunities for those local being either city or county projects that will help with economic development, that will help with tourism in particular. I am very fond of group tourism efforts and getting people out to parts of the state where it isn't necessarily not the first thing that might pop into someone's mind. I think that our ability to do these type of projects will be enhanced if we are able to focus on legislation related towards economic development as opposed to bills like the executive orders, House File 815, which the lead Republican on that admitted that it's unconstitutional. So we're wasting time, in my opinion, on bills that are unconstitutional relative to the United States Supremacy Clause. We should be looking at things like tourism, like economic development, utilizing IWIL to help provide, for the recreation aspect to that, supportive of those. Yes.
Thank you very much. Our next question is regarding the Revenue Estimating Conference and the budget. The Revenue Estimating Conference met this month and provided the legislature and governor with the fiscal 21 estimate to set the budget. What does the budget process moving forward look like? And what are some priorities you would like to see included in the budget? We'll kick this off with Senator Kornbach.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted here.
You're good.
Well, the budget process is not working very well this year. The way that it has always worked until the last year or two is that there are joint appropriation subcommittees in each of the spending areas. So for example, except for my first 2 years in the legislature, I've always been on the Education Appropriations Subcommittee. That's a joint committee between House and Senate. You meet during the budget season, usually back in February. You hear from the various stakeholders. So the university presidents often come in, the Board of Regents certainly, community colleges, K-12, and other groups like IJAG, the Iowa Jobs for America's Graduates. That's a group that works with underprivileged youth and make sure that, or helps to make sure that they get through high school. Great people. We're doing none of that this year. The Senate half of the Education Appropriation Subcommittee has not met, will not meet. Neither are any of the other Senate Appropriation Subcommittees, to the best of my knowledge. Democrats are not at all happy about that. But I think more important than that, the people of Iowa should be unhappy about that. The Republicans are just not listening. And I'm sorry, I don't really mean to make this partisan, but those are the people who get to make the decisions, and the decision they're making this year is systematically not to listen to people. As far as budget priorities are concerned, I told you about K-12. We haven't come close to keep funding up with inflation over the last 4 years. The situation is even worse with regard to higher education. The Regents universities have actually been cut. The community colleges have largely avoided that. But again, we're not keeping up with inflation. We've underfunded that by a cumulative total of, I think I came up with $345 million over the last 4 years. That is what contributes to upward pressure on tuition, which I call the tuition tax increase. And long-term, it leads to deterioration of our high-quality universities. Again, our children, that's our future. If we don't invest in their education, I don't know how that businesses are going to be able to find the skilled workers that they need. We are involved in an ever more competitive, ever more interlocking international economy. China is coming forward, growing. They're like 4 times our population. So if we're going to compete, our workers have to be 4 times as productive. And that means investing in education at all levels. We just have not been doing that. And I would be happy to tell the Appropriations Subcommittee that. But again, we're not even meeting this year.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Dave Dio, you want to go next, please?
Yeah, so I touched on a lot of the stuff that you'll probably see in our budget this year. I comment, I guess, in the House, I think we have been having budget subcommittees in the House, maybe not quite as many as sometimes in the past, but in partly part of the issue with the concerns, I think why that didn't happen this year was there was some concerns with COVID about bringing in a lot of groups and a lot of people to, in a meeting, and the concern about spread and kind of the difficulty of managing all of that all online. And there was some, I think they just probably decided to just have more individual meetings. I can assure you that the budget chairman in both the House and the Senate are in contact with all the interested parties and are listening. Like I said, I have seen the overall House budget numbers. You'll see some numbers that are fairly similar to what the governor came out with earlier this year, with a few changes. One of the things that I mentioned that's probably going to be one of the top priorities, as far as if you're looking at dollar increases in funding, will probably be some new money for broadband. The governor had a proposal for $150 million a year. I think what you'll see with the House is we'll probably start out with a little bit lower number, and then probably phase that up a little bit and ramp it up to a higher number in the out year. I think broadband is a huge issue for Iowa, particularly with what we've seen this last year with COVID. It's extremely important people have the ability to be able to get on the internet and do things like what we're doing right now. And there's too many areas of the state where they don't have good enough broadband connections to be able to do that. It hinders economic development in certain parts of the state because so many businesses now have become reliant on being able to have, upload and download at certain speeds. And we have too many areas in Iowa that don't have good enough broadband. So I think that is probably going to be one of the top priorities that you'll see us moving forward with as we go through. And one of the things that's, probably slowing things down a little bit right now is we're still trying to figure out how much money from the federal government we can actually use for this purpose. We may have, we don't know yet how much state dollars we're going to need to put into it for sure. But for now, we're making the assumption that we don't have any. But I think as we move closer to the end of session, hopefully we'll have more answers from the federal government. We'll know how much of this money can be spent on broadband from the federal bailout that passed. So I think you're going to see a fairly healthy increase again for K-12 schools. We've increased funding for K-12 schools now every year since 2010. When Republicans took over the House, there haven't been any cuts the 10 years prior to that. There were across the board cuts about every other year on average, where they would promise a lot more and then cut the funding halfway through the year. So that is something that has not occurred, for quite a while. And I think that you'll see probably also some extra resources for in the justice system's budget, for some things like patrol officers and I assume, some more money for prisons and some areas like that have probably been a little bit shortchanged for a few years. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, but off the top of my head, those are the first things that come to mind.
Thank you, Dave. Representative Wilburn.
I do serve on the Justice Systems Appropriations Committee, and we have been meeting actually, and we're waiting for our chair to put together the proposal for the rest of us to look at. We have some additions that we as Democrats would like to see on that. One of those things particular on potential loss of some federal funds, actually some loss of some federal funds unless there's federal action taken for agencies that provide services for victims of crime. We would like to see, wouldn't be able to support it at the federal level, but something while that's be working out at the federal level, something to support victims of crime here in the state. I think Representative Dio mentioned in terms of our correctional centers, some of the prisons. Unfortunately, the tragedy that happened, at Anamosa here a few days ago, gets at just the concern about our prisons are still, the numbers have been declining, but they're still over capacity. The ratio of staff to people that are incarcerated is out of hand in terms of being able to keep it a safe environment for people that are incarcerated as well as the staff who are there. And so that's something that I would like to see, try and work on those staff ratios. There's a mental health project, a mental health staff that we're hopeful that the chair will put that in the proposal because, mental health, mental illness is something that for years has been identified as an issue here, which connects outside of corrections with the broadband, which I certainly will support, will look forward to being able to support depending on what the package looks like. I think it might have been at this forum before that I mentioned, maybe it was another one, about the way we look at broadband. I think in terms of the scope and scale between the state as well as the federal government, that we need to be looking almost like the interstate highway system was looked at, when that was put together. That's the scale and scope in terms of commerce, in terms of education, in terms of people just connecting with their families and loved ones, regardless of whether there's a pandemic going on. We need to ramp the system up, be prepared to handle that. So those are some things that I'm looking for. And I think also they're not budget bills, but they have an impact on our ability to have Iowa be a welcoming state. We have been in the past. We need Iowa to be a welcoming state. We welcomed people from Southeast Asian refugees in the 70s. Governor Ray did that. We're still struggling here with folks who have been living in the state here. We've got a diversity bill that makes that challenging. Maybe there's some disagreement about what that does or not, but I believe that the tone that sets, we've already heard from folks outside of the state about concern about what's that our Iowans lived in Iowa about what's happening back here. In addition, I don't know if you talked about the tenure bill and the bill trying to get rid of tenure and the negative impact that could have on our regents institutions, the research park here in Ames. I think these, again, they're not appropriations bill, but in terms of business, of commerce, and just a welcoming environment, I think those things can really do damage on our ability to try and push Iowa to #1. I'm done.
Thank you. Senator Green, comments on the revenue estimating conference and the budget.
Yeah, well, it's to Senator Cornbaugh's concerns. I have nothing to compare to other years, but I did talk to Senator Cranbrink last night, and he's given his targets out to all the to the appropriations committees, and he's going to take a bottom-up approach. So he's just releasing them and trusting them to go out and have these meetings now. And I expect here very soon that we're going to be meeting pretty consistently. So I'm really excited about these numbers. It just shows that our state's moving in the right direction. I expect that we're going to make higher investments in a lot of things, and in the meantime have tax cuts at the same time. It's remarkable that we're in a position to do that. I think we're in a position to eliminate triggers and to see some income tax relief, or we're going to see property tax relief. I think we're going to be able to invest in broadband, and it's really exciting time, I think. There's I would like to see an increase in investment in education as well, like ESAs and over in the House. I know you guys are having some fights over there, but the Governor Reynolds Students First Scholarship. She's asking for $3 million. The federal government's going to be shipping us about $1 billion. It's going to go towards education. When we talk about not funding education enough, I just, Senator Cornbach, I have no idea. I wish you could shed some light, but we spend $15,400 per student in Iowa on education, and I don't think I don't agree with him that we're not funding it enough. I've seen the historical data, and we have not cut it. We've always kept up with inflation. And again, I welcome that I welcome that conversation, Senator Cornbach. And so anyway, it's good to be an Iowan, and we're in a good position. So let's finish this.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Beth Wessel-Crochelle, would you like to comment on the budget and the revenue estimating conference?
Sure. I want to emphasize a little bit more what Representative Wilburn said, that it's so sad that we are waiting for an investment into our criminal justice system and our correctional facilities. We had to lose one correctional officer and one nurse in Anamosa this past week. They have been begging for help. They knew that they were in danger. They knew that there were problems there, and we just have not in any way, shape, or form supported our correctional officers. And they work in dangerous areas, and it just is devastating. The loss is devastating, and we absolutely certainly need to do more there. I also serve on the Justice Systems Appropriations Committee. I've been all over the place in a budget subs that I've been on, but this year is my first year back there. So we need to do something there. If you go to education, man, we have 14 areas where of teacher shortages. 14 areas of teacher shortages. There's a bill in the House, and I haven't looked it up. I've heard that we have fewer and fewer people going into education and teacher education every year. There is a bill in the House which I don't think made it through the funnel, but the question was, why do people not want to be teachers anymore? Unfortunately, I think that's becoming more and more clear to us. The conditions in schools are not good, and for many, many people, I heard the story of one teacher who quit this year simply because she couldn't take the violence of students with mental health disorders and behavior disorders. One of the areas where we have a teacher shortage. We don't have enough behavior disorder teachers. We don't have enough special ed teachers. We don't have enough school social workers. And so you can go down the line, but there's a reason people are leaving and not coming into education, and we need to do better. Senator Cornbach mentioned the regions last year. I think we had status quo budgeting for almost every single area of the budget. There were a few changes in the HHS budget, but we had status quo except for we cut the regions by $8 million. And you know, they are suffering just like every other organization in terms of COVID. The regions need our support. We need the regions. I did a point of personal privilege the other day on that. We got an email from University of Iowa talking about how they had a part in creating the vaccines that we are all now begging for. And I mean, literally people are out there begging for these vaccines so we can get back to normal. Yeah, this is an institution that received a budget cut last year. I mean, the research that's being done there, it goes beyond the economy. It's like what keeps us alive. And we have got to make an investment in there and just stop tearing these institutions down.
Thank you, Representative Wessel-Crochelle. Representative Wilburn, I'll start with you, and I address the whole group with this. It seems like there's general consensus that broadband is important. There's general consensus that the legislature will likely invest in broadband in this legislative session. My question would be, what does the deployment and the distribution of those dollars look like? we've clearly got very, very sophisticated and well operated independent telephone cooperatives across the state and other much larger providers. How do you envision that those dollars and those funds being deployed? I'll start with you, Ross, please.
Well, first, in light of just the technology needs for the state, I know in the House, I don't know in the Senate, Senator Cornbach can comment. A new standing committee was created to address technology issues in general. So I suspect that will be where the thinking, the leadership will come to tease out what that may look like. I think it's important. The scale and scope, whatever comes out of the next stimulus package that President Biden has put together for infrastructure. My hope would be that the governor will try and work in partnership with the federal government and not reject or deny funds that would be eligible for infrastructure for the state of Iowa. Again, I think we're going to have to ramp up, but not take a look and assessment what we have. And, it may be some partnerships that need to be created, or, if there has been competition, we may need to move from a competition mode to a complementary. How can the resources be best deployed to enhance what infrastructure we have in place? And then look at, where an assessment of where the gaps are, so I don't, there may need to be some type of study looking at the assets before a decision is made about that. But clearly, if in terms of capacity, I think that we need to take a look at the places that have little to none in terms of access, or you live on one side of town and you can look across the street and someone doesn't have. I was in Allegheny County and at the superintendent's home on Ragbri, and they didn't have access, but you could look at the just down the ravine and up the hill, and they had full access over there. So we need to get some minimum level of access and threshold and go from there.
That indeed is a real problem. Senator Cornbach, would you like to respond to how that funds might be distributed and or deployed for broadband?
Sure. I think that this is a very important initiative. Qualifies in my book as being infrastructure. And I think it's absolutely vital to our rural areas and to our small towns. It really presents an opportunity. This whole COVID pandemic has been quite a burden on everybody. But one of the things that will come out of it at the other end is a greater ability to deal with a dispersed workforce. And I think that's going to create opportunities for small business growth and job growth in our rural areas. But obviously, to make that happen, you need high-speed broadband. So I think that's something that we really do need to deliver on. The specifics of the particular bill, I have not been involved with that yet, so I will defer to others who may have been doing that. But another reason we need that is telemedicine. Again, we have been developing that capability. I remember visiting Sheriff Fitzgerald over at his jail facility back, it must have been 15 years ago at least, delivering psychiatric service or psychological counseling to jail inmates through telemedicine. So this has been something that's been coming on for a long time, but certainly the urgency has been promoted by the pandemic situation. And it's not just rural areas. Clearly with our schools trying to operate remotely, at least some of the time, it has brought to the fore again the digital divide. People lower income, some neighborhoods not that well served, including some neighborhoods just outside of Ames. Remember Representative Heddens used to live up in one of those, and we won't identify what area that is, but somehow the company skipped over that one neighborhood. Dan, you touch on one of my favorite subjects in this area is the role of cooperatives. You know, I see this as having a lot of similarities to the problem of rural electrification in the 1930s. You know, the basic economic problem is too few customers per mile of wire. And the cooperatives played a very important role in extending electric power to rural areas. I think that they can do a lot of the same with regard to broadband. They have access to the right of way. They have the whole customer base signed up. I mean, who doesn't have electricity? They have some of the back office facilities as far as billing is concerned. Yes, they would need to probably to partner with somebody else who knows the communications technology. But I think that they can play a real role, and I've been urging them for several years to step up and do that.
Thank you, Senator. Dave, you want to respond to deployment of the resources that may very well be allocated?
Yeah, so there's two different tracks in the House for broadband right now. You've got the funding track. There's those, I talked about those discussions on the budget. The other track is the policy piece of it. And, you know, the governor came out with a proposal, and her emphasis and focus has been on very high speed, which would be 100 upload, 100 download, which currently right now that can only really be provided by fiber optic. And so her proposal was almost entirely, I believe, would have been aimed at fiber optic. And we, in the House, we had some concerns that there are some areas that it's going to be very difficult to get fiber optic to for various reasons, you know. And there are other technologies that are maybe not quite as fast, but still offer enough speed to be able to do, like, say, video conferencing or something like that, you know. And, you know, whether it's satellite or towers or, you know, may possibly be a number of different ways that could actually be accomplished. So we've changed the original legislation that the governor had and put in a proposal for about 20% of it to go towards those type of things, with the emphasis to try and get broadband out to areas that are more remote, that might be very difficult to get fiber optic to, but you could still get some high-speed internet that is just maybe not quite as fast, but fast enough for now. And then, so that bill has been working its way through the House. Yeah, I think that's been probably the most interesting discussion I guess we've had. House Republicans have had several discussions as a group talking about that and what direction we wanted to go, and how much resources we were going to need to put into that. You know, for at least this you know, 3-year period that the funding is what we're looking at. So I'd be happy to take any, if you have people online there that have any thoughts on this, I'd sure be interested in hearing what other people had to say about it. But you may have some people that know more, understand the technology better than I do.
You and me both. Thank you, Dave. Representative Wessel Crochelle.
Yeah, I was just this morning I knew this would be a part of our discussion, so I was trying to take a deep dive into the bill. And I have to tell you, it's pretty complicated on the distribution. I do believe that we have to set some minimum standards for anybody who's going to be taking state funds to expand to these underserved areas. But yeah, it is kind of complicated, and it's kind of changing some of the programs that we have, mostly modifying them and expanding and redefining some of the programs. So I will continue to study that, but certainly I support going out to underserved areas. I will also mention, though, and Senator Cornbach touched on it, that even when you have access to it, if you can't pay for it, it is causing a huge divide in our community. When we were at the height of the shutdown, I was getting lots and lots of requests from constituencies, because they usually go to the public library to access the internet and apply for jobs online, apply for unemployment. You know, they had no way of doing it. I contacted David Martin from the city council, and he said, well, they can go sit in their car at Furman, at the swimming pool. Of course, wasn't open, but there was a good signal there, so they could sit outside the library. But you know, again, you have to have a car if it's cold or raining or whatever. Access was really tough, and the families with children in schools who didn't have access, the school was doing the best they could to provide hotspots. But even if there's access, we have to make sure that everybody can afford to have it. I mean, housing, food, broadband, electricity. Um, we have to look at it in a broader aspect, I think, than what we are looking right now.
Thank you, Beth. Our next question, I'll start with Representative Dio. Well, hold on. This is probably a Senate question. I'll ask the question. If you've got a perspective on it, please join or simply pass. This week, the Senate Ways and Means Chair, Senator Dawson, introduced a tax bill that would eliminate income tax triggers and a property tax omnibus bill. What are your initial thoughts on the proposed legislation and its impacts on the Story County area?
Well, let me address the property tax bill. Senator Green, I believe, is no longer on the call. And I meant to bring this up earlier. He was talking about property tax relief. I'm sorry, but that's not accurate. I have in front of me an email from the city manager's office. It says our budget for fiscal year 21-22 includes $886,676 in state replacement tax that is used directly to offset the property tax payment as the bill was intended. That's referring to the property tax bill that was passed in 2013. It reduced commercial and industrial property taxes, and it promised that the state would backfill the lost revenue. That was not that was supposed to be in perpetuity. Perpetuity, it turns out, is only 8 years. The loss of those funds, the email goes on, would cause about a 3% increase in the property tax rate. And of course, assessed values are going up. That would lead to an increase in the property tax bill of more than that. There is a little bit of language in the bill that was in the Senate that would provide a little bit more money for the schools to a little bit offset that. But then, of course, as I noted before, we are underfunding K-12 this year. 137 districts will be on budget guarantee, which is to say they will get a property tax increase because of that. So I don't agree that this is property tax relief. It does wind up with the mental health. The state taking over that. We have an imperfect system right now, to be sure, but at least the property tax funding for mental health is a stable source. As the other parts of this bill demonstrate, the state is not a reliable partner, and we can't have mental health funded by an uncertain stream of revenue. So I did not support that bill coming out of Ways and Means. I will not support it on the floor.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else want to comment on that, or should we move on?
I can jump in on that. I don't disagree with Senator Cornbach about the property tax proposal. It's not receiving quite as a real warm reception yet in the House. There's also an issue. We have a concern with, if you eliminate the local levy for mental health, then really, do local governments or the local regions, for mental health, do they have really any incentive to continue to control costs if they're just receiving a check from the state government? And we have a concern with that. Currently, they have an incentive, to use those local dollars judiciously. And so we're still looking at the proposal, but I would say that it's not something that's really at the top of our list. With regards to the income tax proposal, there is quite a bit of interest in the House. I think we're looking at right now. I personally favor eliminating the triggers, but the problem is we don't know yet whether the federal government will punish us for doing that. There's a potential that because of some of the strings the feds attached, they said that states and local governments could not raise or could not cut taxes, if they're receiving some of these federal dollars. And so we're still trying to get some confirmation about how exactly that would impact a vote to eliminate the triggers. The odds are that the triggers are going to be triggered anyway because revenues have been so strong. It looks like the odds that tax cut will probably go into effect even without any action by the legislature, probably. With regard to the other part of that, the inheritance tax portion, I'm in favor of phasing out the inheritance tax. The Senate Democrats voted for that too. And some of their reasons are interesting. I think I agree with most of those. I think there's a number of good reasons for doing it. The inheritance tax is very variable from year to year. It's not a very steady source of revenue for the state. It goes up and down quite a bit. I think we can afford to do it, at least if we, for sure, if we phase it out. So I'm generally favorable to what the Senate Republicans have done on the income taxes, but not so much on the property tax piece.
Thank you. Beth or Ross, anything to add?
This is Ross. The only piece that I would add, is that all of the chamber members, look deeper than just, property taxes are good or not. A critical piece that was alluded to earlier is the local impact. The state of Iowa really provides a narrow number of ways that cities and counties can generate revenue. And so, you have to, my hope is, it doesn't always happen, that the state takes a look rather than just a blanket reduce property taxes. We need to look at, the ability of service delivery. It's not accumulating money, it's service delivery. And there's a heavy reliance by definition on the property tax at our local level. And, it's talked to kind of in the abstract in some ways, or in a very limited fashion about good, bad. But when you're talking about property tax at the local level, what services are you willing to not have your city or county provide for business, for education, for daily living? So it's important to look at a deeper level, a whole context.
Thank you.
I don't have a lot to add because I haven't really looked at these bills. I am concerned. I mean, I think the one that they are cutting property taxes to and shifting all the mental health dollars over to the state. One of the concerns I know everybody has is that the property taxes are the most reliable source of funding. Once you start relying on the state, you don't know what's going to happen there, because the legislature can be very, I guess flip-floppy is the best word to use. 1 year we might decide that we're going to fund mental health services and the next not. And the local communities really rely on those services. And I think we have to be really careful not to, in terms of taking away a reliable source of funding. So that would be my concern there. I haven't looked at all these bills. There are quite a few of them out there. I do find some of them concerning.
Thank you, Beth. Let's look at local economic development for a moment. Tax increment financing in probably most communities in Iowa is the local economic development tool. And not every year, but frequently in every legislative session, it seems the tax increment financing gets brought up as something that should be, I guess, tinkered with, or the dial should be turned a little bit. Any perspectives on possible changes to tax increment financing in the 21 session? Let's start with Dave.
Yeah, I haven't taken a close look at the proposal this year, but my understanding is it's a fairly modest proposal that really just gets into the perpetual TIFs that are, go beyond 20 years or continue to roll over. And I've always supported doing something about that. I think at some point that these TIFs in these areas need to end, and they need to go back to providing the original intent was eventually that this property would go back on the tax rolls and would provide revenue to all of the different taxing entities and not just the city. And so that benefits all the other taxing entities. And I think at some point that they shouldn't just go on forever. And if that's what this proposal does, then I support it.
Thank you, Dave. Representative Wessel Crochelle, thoughts on that?
I've heard that there is a proposal out there. I think there's just beginning discussions in our caucus about it. I don't know where it's going or what it is. I guess I would rely on Dave's description of it. But
Very
yeah,
good.
I think there is some discussion about whether that should move forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Wilburn.
Again, as someone who's served at the local level, we utilize tax increment financing. When we used it, it was medium term. It was not the long term. We were very judicious about it. We tended to put in place, not a total foregoing. We phased in that increment. So as the property, as the project was completed and started to be utilized, we did utilize, make sure that increment was being phased in terms of being fully brought back on the tax rolls at the new tax assessable value. And then we also looked at, what was done in some cases, what was done with those additional, did it go towards infrastructure? What did that additional, the money to the revenue to the additional tax roll? It can, when done well and done judicially, it can be an effective tool for the local property value.
Thank you. Senator Kornbach will conclude the TIF question or tax increment financial question with you, please.
Well, two things. First of all, I'm not aware of a vehicle in the Senate, but Ways and Means bills do not have to meet the final deadline, so it's possible for things to come forward still there. My two long-term concerns about TIF. One is there have been some instances, and Ross can speak to this better than I can, I think, where TIF has been used by one community to basically to steal an investment from a different community. Wasn't it the Von Maur store that Coralville stole from Iowa City, or was it the other way around? I think it must, the way he's smiling, must have been Coralville that did the stealing from the city he was mayor of. So I don't know how you define that well enough to prevent that from happening. But the idea should be to incentivize new investment, not simply relocating from an adjacent community. That's counterproductive. The other thing that I've always felt uncomfortable about is basically that a city can decide to TIF an area and divert the incremental financing property tax revenue, not just the city's share, but they can also divert the county and school district share. And I believe it's still the case they can do that without consulting the county or the school board. And I would certainly be interested in reforming that. If the city council wants to divert the money, its share of the money, well, then it's accountable to its voters for that. But if they wanted to divert the school and county money, I think that they should. There should be some requirement that those entities be brought into the decision making. That's it.
Very good. Thank you. Well, I think we're down to the last word. So we've got 10 minutes for some closing comments, and I'll wrap it up at the conclusion of those comments for all of you. Representative Wesley Crochelle, thanks for joining us. Why don't we start with you?
Well, thanks. It's always good to get together and discuss the issues. It'd be nice to see people in real time soon. I don't know how many of you have gotten a vaccination. I've gotten one so far, and I know it's going to open up to everyone pretty soon. And I'm highly recommending that everybody go out and get your vaccinations so that we can all get together soon. This has been such just a surreal time for us, both in normal everyday life, and then in serving in the legislature with trying to maintain healthy situations there. So it's been kind of difficult. It's been a difficult year where not everybody agrees that we should all be taking the same precautions and keeping each other safe. We haven't done very much on COVID relief and helping our citizens with some of the struggles. I just heard from a constituent today who is facing eviction from her home due to unemployment she's actually been employed now since November and has been paying off some of the debt, but getting caught back up is tough. So I think we have a long ways to go. We need to address some of these issues, and I'm hoping that's what we do as we get into the final weeks of the Iowa legislative session. Again, thanks for having this and hosting this forum. I look forward to our next one, and I think that one you're actually talking about possibly an in-person. So hopefully that'll be possible.
Yeah, if nothing else, a hybrid where those who are comfortable can come in person and those who prefer to be on a Zoom call. So we continue to work through that. Thank you, Representative Wesley Crochelle. Representative Wilburn, please, closing comments, remarks.
Absolutely. Thanks again for hosting. And I too look forward for the time to get together. I've had my first vaccine this week. So in 3 weeks, look forward to be a little bit more comfortable. I'll still be taking some precautions and would be glad to come to, depending on how you lay it out, a hybrid format to be there face to face. And thank you everyone who has been trying to take the precautions. I encourage you, consult your medical professional, and if possible, get the vaccine. Let's do it for each other, and let's take those precautions. I've seen a lot of places around town doing, a lot of people, and really appreciate. Let's think about the dramatic inconvenience now, so that we can keep that period of time short, so that we're not pushing this out another year. So thanks everybody.
Well said. Thank you, Senator Cornbach.
Well, I want to thank you, Dan, for arranging again, and Sarah Dvorsky as well. Thanks to all of the sponsors. Thanks to all the people who participated. My home phone number is in the phone book. There aren't very many queues. I don't have any place to hide. And I welcome phone calls at home. I'm home every evening and most of the time on weekends as well. Let me finish by giving a shout out to our Ames School Board and our school superintendent. First of all, for their efforts at educating our students so that they can succeed in an ever more increasingly diverse world. We're a more diverse population in the United States. We are economically tied through international trade and other forms to other countries around the world more than we ever have been. Our students, if they're going to be competitive economically, if they're going to be successful as citizens and citizens of the world, not just of America, they need to be able to relate to other people, to understand other cultures. And they need to understand other Americans as well. We certainly have been divided politically, socially, economically for the last several years, more so than I think any time in my lifetime since maybe the 1960s. So the school board undertook this year a Black Lives Matter week where they helped to educate our students, to make them aware of some things that students sometimes aren't aware of. that other people don't always live the same lives that they do and sometimes face significantly greater challenges. The school board, the school superintendent, school board member Monique Bacon, and a couple of staff were called down to be the victims of an inquisition, in my view, by the House Government Oversight Committee. They were treated very rudely, very badly. I think it was a disgrace to the House. I will tell you, I sat through as much of it as I could. The Senate was debating and voting on things. I had to duck out from time to time. I know that Representative Wilburn was there as well. Kudos to the superintendent and to Ms. Bacon. They kept their cool. They were 100% professional, objective, answered the questions straightforwardly. They did a job that under the worst of possible circumstances, they did a job to make our community proud. And I was so proud for them. Pride wasn't the feeling I had towards many of the members of the committee who were engaged in that inquisition. So thanks to the school board, thanks to President Winterstein, to Rick Sanders from the Research Park. We've had a lot of good local people speak up this session on behalf of issues and concerns vital to, and they've been a great help.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Dave Dio, please conclude for us.
Well, I'm going to mention a couple of things that I think all of the attendees mentioned. I was vaccinated almost 2 weeks ago with my first dose, so I plan on getting my third dose sometime in the next couple of weeks here, and I would urge everyone to get vaccinated so that the more that we can get vaccinated, the more likely we are to be able to return to normal. And I think that's important for everybody to do that. And as Senator Quirmbach did, I'll mention that a couple of ways you can contact me if you have any questions or anything you think of that you want somebody in the legislature to know. You can contact my home phone number also. I don't mind calls at home. You may get my answering machine because I'm not there a lot, but I will try and respond to them. My number is 515-382-2352, and then you can always send an email, and to all the legislators. The last part of the legislators' email is all the same, first and second name before that. And it's dave.dio@legis.iowa.gov. So I'd be happy to, if anybody wanted to contact me, please feel free to do that. I'll try and get back to you. So thank you for the forum, Dan, and enjoy it as always.
Thank
And
you.
if I could just add, I put my home phone and my home email in the chat. My home email is the one to use. It doesn't get clogged up with every vendor who wants to sell something to the state.
Very good. Well, to the three gentlemen who are still with us, thanks to each of you for taking time to be with us and our members today. Thank you for your service. All the best for the balance of the legislative session. I would say thanks to our sponsors once again. I'd encourage you to join us on April 23rd. More details will be forthcoming on our next legislative forum. Again, we'd like to think that we will have maybe a hybrid, if nothing else, session where people have an option of either being there in person or being online. It's also on April Fool's Day is Day at the Capitol. Ames Chamber of Commerce Day at the Capitol. We won't be there in mass like we have been historically, but there will be a small delegation of myself and a number of members of my team providing some refreshments around the noon hour that day. So we do look forward to that. And then finally, on May 21st, mark your calendars for our legislative wrap up. I think you'll be done by then. At least we hope you'll be done by then. I'm sure you do as well with the 2021 legislative session. With that, I bid you a great afternoon and a wonderful weekend. And thanks again to each of you for being with us today. And remember to remain Story County strong. Thank you so much.